This is the Stingray Show, and coming up on this edition, we are about to take you back in time to 2010 through 2013 and talk with a former offensive lineman who played in 51 games for Ole Miss under head coaches Houston Nutt and then Hugh. He is now in the process of going to get his doctorate degree in psychology. Jared Duke will join us on this edition of the Stingray Show.
Hi, this is Tim Brando with a reminder. Those of you on Tide 100.9, look out. You're about to feel the buzz of Stingray.
And with that, I want to welcome you inside yet another edition of the Stingray Show. And it's been a while since we talked with a former Ole Miss Rebel, and that is what we're going to do this evening as he played as a stout offensive lineman under head coaches Houston Nutt and Hugh in 51 games over there in Oxford. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the Stingray Show, Mr. Jared Duke. Jared, how are things with you?
Hey there, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
So, Jared, what are you up to these days?
Well, currently, I'm kind of in the process of finishing up school, hopefully forever. I am the psychologist equivalent is of a residency, I guess you would call it, is called an internship, and we're gonna be doing that soon. We're moving off to Illinois State, where I'll be a Redbird for a year and hang out up there in Normal, Illinois. Really looking forward to that. I'll work alongside some of their sport teams and also work in their counseling center. So we're doing it. We're on our way.
So, Jared, talk with us about the journey that you've had, because when we had you on before, you had quite an interesting journey of going from a yacht salesman to now almost a doctoral student.
Yeah. It's been quite a journey for sure. I had to figure things out really. You go to school, we kind of joke a lot. Sorry, my cat's kind of meowing, so sorry about that.
You're fine.
You go to school and you really major in football is kind of what we joke about.
Mm-hmm.
I went in for engineering and really, I guess, had no real intention of, you take your L's in school, especially when you're playing a sport for sure. But so I came out of that and kind of wasn't really sure what to do. I had this kind of degree that, couldn't do a whole lot with. Kind of general studies is what you end up with when you're kind of focused on football all the time. Yeah, like you said, I went into yacht sales. I've been all over the place. The yacht sales. What else did I do? I worked at the summer camp for a while. That was just an incredible experience. I moved to the Hamptons for 3 years. Worked with some cool international students up there, some celebrity kids and that kind of thing. It's kind of an interesting time. Worked there for 3 years and then went for my master's in counseling, athletic counseling specifically. So I really wanted to get into sports psychology. Didn't really know about it when I was an athlete. I had an interesting career when it comes to my athletic career for sure. You mentioned I played in 51 games. I didn't start in many of those because so I started as a true freshman, which, kind of an odd situation for sure. Didn't think that was going to happen. And then I didn't see, real valuable playing time again until my senior year where I started again. So I had kind of an interesting journey. I really, mental health had a lot to do with that. I think, that's an interesting time. And I've worked primarily with that age, the young adult kind of coming out of high school age. It's where we see a lot of psychopathology pop up for a lot of people. and go figure, athletes are people too. So I had a bit of that myself show up in my life, and that really affected my athletic performance, as you would imagine, right? So so all of those really do have an effect as on athletes, all the psychopathologies that you might experience in those settings that any other college student might experience. So had kind of an interesting situation there. And then I just decided, hey, I'm gonna try to maybe pursue sports psychology as sort of a way to, hey, what happened back there, that kind of thing. And then from there, it just kind of ignited. I've really gotten into a bunch of different avenues of psychology in general. So I'm training as a generalist. So I'll do testing currently. I do therapy for all populations really, but I do have that kind of that athletic counseling piece as well in my back pocket. So yeah.
So Jared, I do want to ask you, before we dive back into your playing career, what was that experience like of a yacht salesman? Because we don't often get or hear about that profession.
Yeah. So I was terrible. I was a terrible yacht salesman. I think I didn't know much about yachts, and I don't know, to be honest, how I got the job, if I'm honest. So I only worked there for about 6 months before the store shut down. I hope I didn't have anything to do with that. Maybe I did, but our store sold to another company, and that was just kind of a fortuitous, good things happen when they don't seem good in the moment. But I think I sold one yacht the entire 6 months. I sold another small boat, but I did sell one yacht. And I do remember on the way to showing that yacht, it's kind of like being a real estate agent. My customer wanted a sport bridge yacht. And on the way to, I park in the parking lot, and I Google on my phone, what is a sport bridge yacht? I had no idea what I was doing. So luckily I had, it was a really cool job. It was in Chattanooga. They're really hard to get financed for what I learned. You can do your job, you can do really good work, and then all of a sudden the bank is just like, no, we're not going to finance this because no one really needs a yacht. So, unless you're paying cash, it's not really a good practice really to get into yacht sales. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I learned some good skills, networked a little bit, met some really good people in the boating community in Chattanooga. And luckily for yacht sales as an industry, that was the end of my yacht sales days.
So, Jared, you grew up in Cleveland, Tennessee. When did you start playing football, and did you realize you were good at offensive line?
That's a great question. So, I've been in a lot of these interviews, and I've never been asked that question. I love that. So I started really young. I started in the first grade playing football, Pee-wees. And I think I absolutely idolized Reggie White. Reggie White is from Chattanooga, Tennessee, just right down the road. I wanted to be the next Reggie White. I wanted that to be my career. I wanted to go to Tennessee, then go to, Green Bay was my favorite team, that kind of thing. Always loved D-line. I thought that was my calling. I love this sport because I get to sack the quarterback. I get to cause disruption. And then in middle school, a coach kind of said, no, you're going to be on the O-line. We're not doing this D-line thing. And I actually almost quit in middle school because of that, because I just was like, well, O-line is not fun whatsoever. I have no interest in that. I still stand by that. It's not a fun position to play. It's definitely not glamorous or anything. You don't get to disrupt anything unless you're messing up. So I got into high school. I, you know, I had always had dreams of playing in college. It was never even NFL. I just wanted to play in college, and it sort of just kind of became apparent. I think I remember a quote from Philip Fulmer about, "Hey, there's 5 spots at O-line. Your chances are a lot better being an O-lineman. It's a heavy need area for sure." So, and I started just kind of developing as an O-lineman, started growing like crazy, and my skill set was really fit for O-line more than anything. So got into that and kind of specialized in that area. I played a little D-line in high school, but mostly just O-line.
So, Jared, coming out of high school, who all was recruiting you to play O-line and college football for them?
Yeah, so my recruitment was kind of late in the game. I was really set on playing for Tennessee for a long, long time. And I had an injury my sophomore year, and that was, I think that's kind of where a lot of players start to blossom a little bit as college recruits, as college, candidates, really. And I think, my first kind of letters were, I think I had some Tennessee Tech and everything, and maybe some of the service academies. I didn't get an offer until Columbia, actually. So Columbia and Harvard started kind of paying attention because my grades were really good in high school. Don't know what happened after that, but Columbia and Harvard were kind of, really interested, visiting, that kind of thing. I was like, all right, well, Ivy Leagues, that's hard to beat there scholastically. But it wasn't until I went the summer before my senior season, I went camping everywhere. I think I went to 11 total camps that summer. And so that was my summer, basically. I went to Auburn, went to Tennessee, and Louisville was the camp that I really it all kind of came together. And Louisville was my second to last camp. And I got my offer there at that camp. And I was just kind of floating, really, at that point. I thought that was just, okay, well, that's where I'm going to go. They kind of showed me around, and they really liked me. I thought that was really cool. And I was like, Mom, Dad, let's shut it down for the summer. I think I know where I'm going. Let's call it. My dad's boss was a big Ole Miss fan. And my dad's like, hey, my boss is going to be really angry if we don't go down to Ole Miss and at least camp. Like, we've already bought it. Let's do it. I know you're tired. I know you're ready for this process to be over, but maybe you like it. And went down to Ole Miss, fell in love. The whole story. Anytime you hear about a visit to Oxford, that someone's definitely falling in love with that place. I really liked the coaching staff, loved Coach Nutt. He really, he's kind of took me under his wing during that camp and really wanted to kind of hone in. I was like, well, this is different. Head coaches don't usually hone in on players, usually, unless they're really interested. And shortly after that, I got my offer from Ole Miss, and the rest was somewhat history. Auburn, I had some very, I think in this day and age, we'd call it maybe like a camp offer from Auburn. I think the vernacular's changed a little bit with recruiting nowadays, but you hear about camp offers a lot. I think that's pretty much what I had from Auburn. It wasn't really a committable offer, I guess is what you would call it. But they were sort of kind of playing games a little bit. A couple of the position coaches that I'd worked with were crazy about me, really wanted me to kind of hold on a little bit. Those coaches, I had a really good camp there. I do remember that. And I wanted to go there. It wasn't until I had a conversation. Jacques McClendon was a offensive lineman for Tennessee, and he's from my hometown. He had visited one of my scrimmages that year, and he talked to me about it, and he basically told me, hey, you have to take Ole Miss, right? And I was like, what do you mean? Because I was kind of holding out for Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you have to take Ole Miss. I said, why? He goes, well, they want you, and they trust you now, so they're going to trust you later. So that's what you need to listen to. And I think that's kind of what I said, okay, yeah, honestly, that's really good advice. I'm gonna go ahead and commit to this thing and shut it down. So that was the process. We had a few schools, like State offered without really knowing who I was. I think it was kind of like, oh, Ole Miss offered, so State's going to offer. That was an interesting recruitment as well. They don't take too kindly to you. That was Healy, Coach Healy, I believe, was recruiter there. That's its own story, but that was an interesting courtship there that I experienced.
So, Jared, would you talk about that?
Yeah, so they offered. I had known by that point that some teams just kind of throw out these offers without really knowing who you are and that kind of thing. And I had heard that like rivals, because I think after Louisville offered, Kentucky got really involved too. I was like, well, what's this thing with rivals? Why are they? They're just kind of piggybacking off each other a little bit. So
yeah.
Mississippi State coach Hevesy, I think it was Hevesy. He called and said, if you come down, you have an offer. Like you can, but you have to visit us first. And I said, okay. Well, by that point, I was really, really interested in going to Ole Miss and kind of silently committed. And I said, all right, well, we'll see if it works out, because that was going into camp for my high school camp and stuff. And I was already just completely enamored by Coach Nutt and what they had going down there. Remember, I think they were going into that season like number 4 in the nation, really high. They were, it was just kind of perfect. And I think there was a dead period where I get a call at 1:01 in the morning, like 1 a.m. And I didn't answer, obviously. I don't even think it woke me up, really. And he called me later on. It was from a Starkville number. And he called me later on. And I was like, was that you? Like, I'm sorry I missed your call. He's like, I just wanted to, be the first one to call you once our dead period ended. And I said, well, Coach, I've already kind of committed to Ole Miss. And he let me have it. He absolutely. I think I got a few choice words I won't repeat here, but that's recruiting. It is what it is,
So, Jared, talk about meeting Coach Houston Nutt for the very first time.
Yeah, what a special guy. They talk about Ronald Reagan being this kind of guy who, when you talk to him, you feel like you're the only person in the room that he's talking to. I think that all really applies to Houston Nutt as well. Just kind of this magnetic personality, charismatic, just you kind of believe in him when you hear him. And, obviously that didn't end super well there at Ole Miss for him and his staff. But, funny story, at the end of the camp, usually the head coach will come out and kind of give a talk, and everyone's kind of taking a knee around him on the field. And they point to, they're like, all right, everyone, we're done for the day. There's lunch boxes, right outside the stadium by the exit. And, I wanted to kind of talk to Houston. I grew up kind of watching him at Arkansas, and I really, he's just a magnetic guy, I can remember him after that whole Darren McFadden game, I think against LSU, where he just was explosive in an interview. And I thought that was really cool and admirable. And I wanted to meet him afterwards. and he kind of has a firm grip on my shoulder for a while, and he's like, stay right here. He goes, they're gonna eat box lunches. He said, we're eating ribs. And he took me into the IPF, and there was like a separate dinner entirely set out for, I guess, certain recruits and stuff. And by that point I was like, okay, I think there's something here. I think I might be getting an offer here soon. And sure enough, I did. But he's a special guy. I know people make jokes about him and everything, but he gave me a chance, and I'm always going to be really, in favor of him for sure. But
So, Jared, talk about what it took as a lineman to get your body ready for the SEC of going from high school to college football, please.
yeah, so I got to campus at like 365 or something crazy. And so I ended up immediately just being in fat camp, is what we called it. And it was actually me and I remember Jeremiah Mazzoli was in fat camp with me for a little while. Surprisingly, they needed him to lose a few as well. But that summer was by far the most exhausting of my life. It was terrifying. It was the first time away from home. I'm in this. They kind of put us in one of the worst dorms on campus, which was, I don't know, I think a character building experiment on their part. But we that was a rough summer. You're just constantly tired, and there's no sense of rest whatsoever that comes from that. And and I had to lose. I think I lost down to 330 by the time that season started. And that's a rough process. I mean, they take you and they kind of shape you a little bit, and they cut on you some, and that's a rough process for sure. I can remember one time during like 2-a-day camps, hottest practice I've ever experienced for sure. You have to weigh in before and after those camps, and when you finish. If you've lost enough weight, you have to drink a certain amount of Gatorade per pounds lost during camp, like that. So they make you replace your fluids, or you can go on an IV after camp. And I remember a 2-hour practice. I weighed in 16 pounds lighter after that practice. And so losing weight was hard, but not on that day. That was a real
Yes.
That was an easy day to lose weight. Needless to say, I didn't drink the Gatorade after that. I went ahead and used the IV after that practice. But it's a tough process. You're kind of a doughy high schooler, and you come in, and it's time to grow up really quick. And if you don't grow up, you're probably not going to hang. And I think I didn't hang for a long time.
So, Jared, your first game action came on the road in 2010 versus Tulane down in New Orleans. Talk about that experience of playing in your first action on the road at Tulane.
Yeah, actually, so I think I might have told you wrong. So Tulane, the game after that was my first game, I believe. I think that might have been Kentucky potentially.
Okay.
And that was just on the just on point after team and field goal team. And, I remember thinking, in high school, I went to a bigger high school, wasn't really known for anything other than band for the most part, that high school, but they did sell out games. It was a passionate fan base. And I remember just, there were some really huge moments. But surprisingly, I felt prepared for kind of the audience and the crowd noise and just the chaos that goes on. I felt very natural. I was like, oh no, I've been preparing for this, and I've been dreaming about this my entire life. My one goal in life was to become a college football player. Like I said, not even an NFL player, just a college football player. I was always a fan of college football before playing ever. And so that was really surreal just to line up, even if it was just a point after kind of block. And that was just a really special moment. I thought that was I was glad that it went that smoothly, though, because I felt very comfortable, actually, surprisingly. And maybe if I were thrown in there for actual plays, that might have been a little different. But just being able to take a step and block some guys for point after for half a second, that was probably a good transition for me.
So, Jared, your first start on the offensive line came against number 3 Auburn at home later that season. Talk about getting your first start against number 3 Auburn in 2010.
Yeah, so this is a funny story. I thought I've told it a couple times on podcasts. So the week before was Arkansas. We had a guy go down. I go in for actual playing time, and it went really well, actually, for me. Actual action instead of just doing point after, that kind of thing. And I go in, and it goes decently well. We fly back, so we have Sunday workouts. Sunday, they're starting to kind of figure out, okay, what went wrong? Who can we maybe, let's look at personnel a little bit. And then I remember Monday, I get called into my coach's office, and he says, "Hey, Duke, we're going to start you this week." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's fun." And I remind you, the week before that, if you remember, Nick Fairley,
yes,
had a game against Georgia where he absolutely went crazy, and he, I think he earned his kind of bad sport. I think maybe some late hits, that kind of thing. But he was definitely making a name for himself as not only, the sportsmanship stuff, whatever, but just as a player. I mean, he was, defensive MVP that year, and he was already starting to make a name for himself. And so I get told that, and I get back in my Jeep, and I'm listening to like a sports radio of some kind, and the topic of Auburn comes up, and they're going over the Nick Fairley game that had happened that week, and I was it's like a movie, honestly. One of them says, if I ever had to play against Nick Fairley, I'd just go ahead and quit the game. And I was like, no way is this happening. And so I just turned it off, really.
Right.
I can't go into this week with that in my mind at all. But it was a very surreal game in general. That's when Cam Newton was doing his thing. Watching him, the legend of Cam Newton was already growing at that point too. And being on the field across the sideline from him was something. And I'd studied Nick Fairley quite a bit that week, just terrified of what he was going to do to me. Absolutely dominates me on the first play. He beats me off the line, and I actually talked to Mazzoli after this. Mazzoli said, there was a shadow because the sun was behind him or something. He's like, all I saw was a shadow coming to me. And knowing Mazzoli, he got out of it, of course, because that's what he did most of the time. And the rest of the game, I kind of held my own a little bit. When he wanted to turn it on, he could, and he could kind of take over a little bit. But, he had that one rush. I don't think he had any tackles for loss or sacks that game, which was a win for me.
Oh, yeah.
When he had that one quarterback hurry that one time, but the first play of the game. But he actually, this is crazy too. He turned out to be a sort of a good guy. He played a little dirty during the time. I think he pulled me down on my face mask once. But I held my own, and that was kind of cool. And he, it was kind of he actually tracked me down I was almost to the tunnel. He ran me down and talked to me after the game. And that was kind of cool because he kind of gave me my props a little bit. and to the media after he mentioned me, which was like, what is going on? This is crazy. Never thought that would happen. And that was really neat. And then after that game, funny enough, Michael Orr was outside, and I met him for the first time. He'd been around. I'd never really talked to him, but he's like, hey, this was your first start today. I was like, yeah. And he goes, against Nick Fairley. So I was like, yeah. And he goes, that's similar to me. My first start, I think, was Glenn Dorsey. So going up against Glenn Dorsey. So we kind of shared that moment, took a picture, that kind of thing. But that was a really special game despite losing horribly, which happened that season a lot.
So Ole Miss finished in 2010 with a record of 4-8. But what were some of your fondest memories of your first season at Ole Miss?
I think so. That was, that was it. Really, that first start was really, really special. The other thing was, I grew up going to games every now and then. My parents would surprise us with tickets to Tennessee games, and it would be, it would be like a Rutgers game or like, a no name game. I think we did get one SEC Arkansas Tennessee game we got to watch, but I grew up just in love with Tennessee, to be honest with you, and I thought, I want to play in that stadium one day, and I got to play in it later that year. I remember talking to my dad and saying, hey, I wonder if Coach Nutt would let me travel for that game. This was at the beginning of the season. I said, we're going to Tennessee. This is the last time we're going to go to Tennessee for a long time. This is really special. I wonder if Coach Nutt, like, even if I were just kind of a ball boy or something, like, let me travel with the team. And I just want to be a part of that on that sideline. And, things just sort of happened, and I ended up starting that game. I remember looking up and seeing my name on Neyland Stadium scoreboard. And that was a really special moment. Just all my family got to come out. We got a ton of extra tickets for that game. And, they had my grandma hiking up to the top in the visitor section. That wasn't very cool, but it was cool. I just got all of my family to get to go to see that. Outcome did not happen for us in any way. I think we got steamrolled that game, and there's a lot of stories within that game I could tell, but it was a really special moment for me.
So, Jared, going into the 2011 season, oddly enough, Ole Miss took a trip to Fresno, California to take on Fresno State. Yeah. What was that experience like of playing on the West Coast in Fresno, California?
Well, I remember getting there early. We got there a day earlier than we usually would. What else do I remember? I remember the fruit was incredible. I'd never been out west in my life. That year was the first time I even rode in a plane. Was down to that Tulane game. So it was all new experiences for me. So going out west was really cool. It was a lot hotter than I expected it to be out there. Fresno's an interesting place. I don't know that I'll find myself going back to Fresno anytime soon. I joked I felt like I was in a Grand Theft Auto video game or something there. It's an interesting place. But we actually won that game, and I remember having to fly back. And within that game, it was interesting. There was a block kick that came through me. Remember, I was relegated that year back to just a field goal team, playing a little bit of live action, really, but mostly just field goal team. And a kick was blocked. Statistically, they had the best kick blocking team in the country. They put Lineman up there. It was a really good. I don't know, my other teams didn't do it, but and I remember just sweating it. Like, I was miserable. Everyone was like, well, you just ruined our shot. You got a kick blocked. I felt miserable. And then the game came down to another kick that was going to be on my side again. And, I remember Coach Nutt actually pulled me aside and talked to me before that. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do my best. I thought I did really well last time, but it got kicked, or it got blocked. So I don't know what I'm going to do. And we obviously won that game off of that kick. And I remember on the flight back, because they're starting to look at film usually on the flight back. Mm-hmm. A coach came by and laughed and said, "Oh, it was the kicker's fault. He kicked it too low. It wasn't your fault that we got it kicked." So all that, I was sweating so hard just for that, and it turned out it was a low kick that got the kick blocked. But I think I got special teams player of the week that week. It was a fun time. It was just, we didn't know that was going to be one of our only 2 wins that season, but there we were.
So Jared, even though you guys went 2-10 in 2011, what are some other favorite moments for you of that season?
Yeah, there weren't a lot of highs that season whatsoever. And kind of, gosh, that season is still talked about as how terrible it was. Mm-hmm. In a lot of cases. There was a lot of off the field stuff that was happening that people didn't quite know about, I think, that went on that season. That season was a mental low for me, not just from football, just from life in general. That was where a lot of kind of depression was kicking in and all that stuff. And that's one of the reasons I got relegated really to second string that year. And honestly, I blocked that out a lot. I blocked it out. I do remember just kind of the fear of, we're getting a new coach, and right. What's that going to look like? And really a positive from that year would be, we started practicing with our new coaches, and we started kind of working out under our new strength coaches, and it was just different. It was like, oh, this is different. This is very good. We're working hard, and we feel kind of efficient about it, whereas we weren't before. So that was sort of okay, this is going to get better type of year.
So, Jared, unfortunately, in 2011, Houston Nutt was fired by Ole Miss. What was your reaction when you heard that news for the first time?
Yeah, I look back on that now, and I wonder, in today's transfer portal era, if I would have stayed an Ole Miss right after that. I was really, really I was a fan of his, and that was tough. Mm-hmm. He was a primary reason I went to Ole Miss. His offense was good for a guy my size, and that was exciting. I built a lot around the idea of working with him and being his player, and so that was tough. Practices were weird once that happened, because I think we had kind of a lame duck situation for a couple games. I'm not sure when he was technically fired, but it was so strange. It was a really, really strange process because we didn't know what to expect. You hear so many rumors. I do remember. So first off, my parents are the ones who told me he was fired. Mm-hmm. I thought, that's crazy that my own coach got fired and I wasn't even told. My parents find out before I do on the news or something. So Archie Manning and I forgot his name. It was a guy from FedEx. We're kind of heading up that search for Coach Freeze. And I remember he had a team meeting. Both of them were leading a team meeting, and I raised my hand and asked, I was like, hey, can you tell us when this happens? Because I don't want to find out from my parents we have a new coach. Is this possible? and I thought that was kind of cool because I got to talk to Archie Manning too. So, but it was like, oh, this is kind of crazy. Like you hear I'm hearing all these rumors. I think Mike Leach's name had been floated. Kirby Smart had been floated. That would have been an interesting transition. Kirby Smart, but there were just names going everywhere. So we had to kind of figure out what was real and what wasn't real.
So, Jared, in comes Hugh Freeze to take over Ole Miss. Talk about meeting Coach Freeze for the very first time.
Oh, gosh. I don't know that I remember the first time necessarily. It's a tricky situation when you kind of have a new staff come in, because you're like, okay, do I have a spot on this team?
Right.
Am I someone that I wasn't even starting on this 2-10 team? Like, why would they want me? That kind of thing. The other thing too is he was bringing in an offense that I was not going to be fit for.
Right.
I was a run first guy, kind of pro style offense, came from it, and he brought in, I think he used the word in his introductory meeting, he used the words basketball on grass. And I was like, oh,
right.
This isn't really going to work. I guess it's funny to say I'd kind of flirted with the idea of transferring at that point, because I was like, I'm not going to be able to work on his offense. Like, it's just not going to happen. Kiffin was an interesting. Kiffin at Tennessee had just left, and I was like, well, Kiffin didn't want me at Tennessee, and that kind of thing. So maybe Dooley will want me, if that kind of thing. So I kind of was or that was the year after. Sorry, maybe Dooley will want me, that kind of thing. So I was kind of kicking around the idea, and I just kind of listened to him, and I was like, all right, this is a confident guy. He seems to know what he's doing. He's recruiting really well too. So all right, let's see about this. I really liked Coach Luke a lot. He was, I'd never heard of him before, and he shows up. He's kind of this intense guy, but I liked him a lot, and I think he had talked to me at one point like, hey, you do fit if you can figure it out. We want to keep you and see how it goes, because I've seen your tape. Like, we know you can play, but back then we really didn't talk about mental health a whole lot and that kind of stuff. So
right.
So yeah, I mean, I didn't really meet and talk to Coach Freeze that much, to be honest. As an offensive lineman, you don't always talk to your head coach too much.
So, Jared, once again, talk about the transition of going from what Coach Nutt run of the pro style to getting your body ready for what Coach Freeze ran, the basketball on grass.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just it was a newer concept for the most part. If you remember, so our senior year, and I know I'm jumping forward a little bit, my senior year, we play Alabama, and that was the year before we beat Alabama. And I think Saban had noted, okay, this is an offense that's designed to take down teams like us, defenses like us, because Bama really kind of they built their defenses around these giant defensive tackles, these big, very north and south running guys. That's how they built defenses. And when you make those defenses run 80 plus plays a game, you can actually do stuff against them. And if you remember, that was the week after playing them that year. My senior year, so 2013, is where Saban kind of made his statement about, hey, is this really what you want football to look like? And that's when a rule change came, because when Saban speaks, we listen, right?
Right.
So I think a rule I think the rule where you have to let defenses sub out, I like to think that we kind of impacted that for sure. Because that was his like, all right, if this is where offenses are going, we have to completely change the way we do defense. So it worked. I mean, it worked to some extent, right? I mean, you definitely gain an advantage, but the biggest learning curve is conditioning and being able to stay in good enough shape to be able to breathe while you do this. And even when I was kind of starting in games, those were some miserable drives when he is just like, nope, on the ball, on the ball, on the ball. There's no real break.
Right.
And the only real, motivation you get to kind of push through it is that the defender you're playing is dying across. They do a lot more running than you. So usually you have the advantage when you're just running inside zone over and over. If you're running any sort of screen as an offensive lineman, you're struggling for sure.
Right.
But I adjusted somewhat to that enough to start again, and I was definitely the biggest starter in the SEC. I think there was a magazine that produced some sort of like mammoths of the SEC article or something, and there was a list of all like the biggest players in the SEC, and I was like, hey, I'm the only one on that starting, and we're running 85 plays a game, so I'm doing something right,
Yes.
So I adjusted, but I think it was clear on film that I was dying half the time. Absolutely miserable.
So Jared, to finish up the regular season of 2012, you got your first win as a player against Mississippi State there in Oxford. Talk about that Egg Bowl game in 2012, please.
It was special. It was really special because we lost back to back to them, and Dan Mullen was really. I mean, he knew how to heat things up. In terms of rivalries, and I think that's a really good strategy, honestly. If you're building a program to go after your rival the way he did, I think it clearly worked for him. So I don't hate on him for it, but there was a lot of hatred around that, and just being able to win one of those was crazy. And then that was my first college field storming, and maybe my only college field storming, but it was a special night. It was a really, really special night. That's the night Moncrief went off, and
yes,
I had never had any kind of ill will towards State. I think if anything, the way I was recruited probably made me dislike State more than the actual rivalry itself. But so I was really happy for the guys that were Mississippians that were on that roster that clearly it meant a ton to those guys. And obviously between me and you, LSU was my I hate these people more than anything. Still kind of are if you talk to my friends, but State's more of a this is a fun rivalry. It got kind of nasty there for a little bit, but my senior year that changed a little bit. The hatred kind of grew for State, but yeah, that first win over them was really special. Just Moncrief going off the way he was. It was a fun night, really fun night.
So, Jared, to cap off the 2012 season, because of that win versus Mississippi State, you guys got to play in the Birmingham Bowl against Pittsburgh. Yeah. Talk about that game in Birmingham in the Birmingham Bowl.
Yeah. So first bowl game for us when I was there. I mean, man, it was pretty electric. Just kind of our fans were jacked up for it. It was clear we had lost a lot. It's funny. I worked at Pitt for a couple of years ago for their university, and I talked to some people about that experience when because they had come off of 2 years in a row of going to Birmingham for their bowl game. So this was their 3rd in a row. They were so tired of it. I think they were just totally checked out. I don't think any fan. Well, funny enough, that season they were slotted to go play West Virginia, their bitter rival, that in the Pinstripes Bowl in Yankee Field, and they end up in Birmingham instead. So they were very unhappy. They didn't want to be there, but you couldn't tell from our sideline because we were just all jacked up. Birmingham was all Ole Miss fans. We packed out that stadium and the hotel. That was just a cool experience. I mean, the hotel is just full of fans, and you could tell something was starting. Like this is kind of the beginning of something, and that was a special time.
So, Jared, going into your final year at Ole Miss in 2013, Ole Miss started the season, oddly enough, on a Thursday night on the road at Vanderbilt in a thrilling back-and-forth game. Discuss what that game was like on the road on a Thursday night at Vanderbilt.
Unbelievable. I remember how hot it was. It was unbelievably hot that night. That was an interesting off season. We had some obviously incredible recruits come in, one of the top classes in the country. So like this thing's building like crazy. Within the O-line, we had one of our teammates die, and right. Park Stevens was, gosh, I feel like he was there for 2 months, maybe, or maybe a month or so. Like he wasn't there long, or maybe he was there for this. Anyway, he like won us over as a unit so quickly, and like was just kind of this cohesive glue guy. And losing him was huge. Like it was really kind of it was tough for all of us. It was we brought in kind of this meaning, a little bit extra meaning into that season, just kind of in remembrance of Park. And Jeff Scott breaks off his 75-yard run. Yes. And Park's number was 75. And we all just kind of took a moment after that, like, oh my goodness, like that was just huge. We're just in a very emotional state there, but it was just a special, really, really special time and gosh, that was a hot game. I don't remember that much.
So, Jared, briefly, a quick follow-up to that. What is it like preparing for the first game of the year on a Thursday night rather than a Saturday?
Well, so the first game of the year, you can kind of simulate your week essentially the same way you would simulate a regular 7-day week. It's not really a short week necessarily. You may turn the page in camp a little earlier to, okay, we got to prepare and start game planning. That gives the coaches the excuse, because at some point late in camp, it's like you can only hit each other and run the same stuff and so many times. Right. We need to start maybe looking forward to game planning and we everything just kind of moved up a week really. It was nice that weekend just to have some extra time for sure, but it was a cool moment. I think we ought to bring back more conference season openers. Yes. In my opinion, I think that was a really cool way to start a season, especially the Thursday night games. That's such a cool thing there.
So, Jared, 2 weeks later, in a non-conference game, Ole Miss went to the Texas Longhorns in Austin, in which Ole Miss won 44-23. Talk about that game against the Longhorns in Austin.
Yeah. Really, I mean, gosh, I think Coach Freeze was on it that week in terms of just preparing us for. Oh yeah, gotta love that one. Got to go horns down there. We had been beaten so bad by them the year before, and it was just like, oh, that didn't seem right. Like something about that game. I don't know what happened, but it was like our chance at revenge. And then you're in one of the largest stadiums in the country, one of the biggest biggest brand probably in the country. And you're like, hey, we get to take a shot. Let's see what we can do. And personally, I think that was maybe one of my best games ever played. By that point, I was starting that season. I'll go back and watch that one every now and then because it was such a fun game through and through. Because that was one of those games where I never really thought we were losing. My wife wanted to watch an old game of mine recently, and she so we watched that, and I was like, I didn't realize how close this game was for most of it because I just thought we were winning the whole time. I thought we just felt like that was a win. It was such a good experience. And their stadium started emptying out. They're like, okay, this is it. This is happening. We're doing this. I got a cool, as a offensive lineman, there's not a lot you can really kind of personal goals in terms of glory, that kind of thing you can have. And I always said, I want to be circled. I want someone to circle me and highlight me in a game. That's all I get to really look forward to as a player. And when I got to my phone after it had blown up because Tessitore had really kind of bragged on me that game. And so that was that was just kind of cool. And he did the circle and the drew arrows and stuff around me. And that was kind of like, yeah, it's a lame goal, but as an offensive lineman, that's really all he gets. So that was a goal achieved for me.
There needs to be more praise for your offensive linemen. Come on now.
Thank you. Yeah, we're only highlighted usually when we mess up. So that was a nice one.
So Jared, after 3 straight losses, Ole Miss got Hugh Freeze's first signature win over number 6 LSU at home, 27-24. Talk about that huge upset of your arch rival LSU in 2013.
Yeah, that was, that in Texas were probably tied for my favorite games ever in my career, probably. We went into that game so banged up. It was sort of the opposite of what I explained with Texas. Like I did not think we were winning that game. I'm pretty honest with myself. After you experience 6 wins in 2 years, you're pretty honest about your prospects. I didn't feel really, optimistic about that one. And we just started putting together drives and it started working a little bit. And like, okay, all right, these guys are just kind of taking it. So let's keep going. Let's try to keep this close in the fourth quarter and see what happens. And sure enough, we kick a field goal to seal it. And that was just that was a fun experience. I remember Coach Luke at the end of that said, "You just beat LSU for the first time in your career." He said, "Now you're an Ole Miss Rebel. So congrats." Like, wow. Okay, well, I'm glad we won then. And that was it too. We had my freshman year, we had a really close game with them that we thought we could win, and then we get blown out my sophomore year. And then my junior year, we went there and had another kind of close game where we're like, oh, we can beat them without a doubt. I don't know what's going on. This isn't the big team that we thought it'd be. And And then, so we'd come close twice in my career, and I was just, come on, we got to do this. And we made it happen. And yeah, the rest was history. I was thrilled by that one. Especially being down so many guys. We had so many injuries going into that.
So, Jared, you are known for at the end of the game not being able to find Coach Hugh Freeze to dump the Gatorade on him, and unfortunately, you made the Sports Center not top 10. Walk us through what happened there on the sidelines trying to find Coach Freeze after the game.
Yeah, so I went back and forth a little bit on Twitter with ESPN on this. So maybe Sports Center or whatever their account was. I like to write the record. We did find him very quickly, actually. So what had happened there? Odell Beckham was returning a kickoff to win that game. In my mind, I was like, all right, we're not going to dunk this guy. We're not going to do the whole. And I think I'd just seen kind of a 30 for 30 or something on the Bluegrass Miracle.
Yes.
Where they dunked the coach, and then sure enough, LSU wins the game, even though Kentucky had dunked the coach. And I was like, that's not going to be us, but I do want to dunk the coach one time in my career. And so I waited for the kickoff to make sure, because Odell Beckham his legend was already growing a little bit there. And I was like, he could totally return this and totally ruin our night and our week and our season. And I was a pessimistic guy, if you haven't noticed. Probably not the regular athlete interview you would get,
This has been awesome.
I was totally like, all right, well, this is going to happen, isn't it? But it didn't happen. Obviously, he gets tackled. Game's over. We had already kind of gathered some Gatorade or some. Actually, we took the first one we got, right, and we're starting to head out towards him. And our trainer runs us down and says, "No, it has to be Gatorade." And I was like, "Whatever, okay, come on." So let's go get some Gatorade. So we went back to the table to combine 2 jugs of Gatorade, of purple Gatorade, I think, one of the colors. Apparently, I learned later, that is in the contract with Gatorade that they have to, you have to use Gatorade, like one of the colors. You can't use water to dunk the coaches, or maybe it's like a bonus of some kind. I don't know what it is, but so we had to, retrack a little bit. And by that point, he was out, not where we had spotted him before. It was me and Patrick Junin, my roommate. And so we run out after him. We can't find him at first. And then we find him pretty quickly, actually. Junin's 6'8", I'm 6'7". We found him, right? It wasn't that hard. It was chaotic, but we found him. And so he was at that point surrounded by cameras. So I was like, all right. And his wife was next to him. So we ended up lining up behind him in the interview, and we're hiding the jug of Gatorade. And that's the shot ESPN has of us, just kind of looking around. We knew we were right behind, Coach Freeze, and we were just and sure enough, as soon as the interview ends, we turned around, we soaked them. So that pops up all the time. It's followed me from employment to employment. Wherever I've gone, people have said, "Hey, is this you?" It finds me on Instagram a lot. I'll get tagged a ton. The comments are hilarious because it's, I enjoyed it. It is what it is, I do always remark that, hey, a lot of people call us dumb in the comments. Junin, the other guy, ended up being a rocket scientist for NASA. And I'm a psychologist, or I'm almost a psychologist. So we're not that dumb, right? I mean, come on. But it is what it is. It's been a funny thing to see every now and then, but the weeks after that were pretty rough in the locker room. They gave us a hard time over that one.
So, Jared, later that season, you were a part of the famous Egg Bowl, the game there in Starkville that was the 110th Egg Bowl, in which Mississippi State wore the gold helmets.
Yeah.
Talk about that incredible game there in Starkville.
Frustrating game. Really, really frustrating. It was rainy. It was cold. From a lineman's point of view, you don't make the calls, obviously, and we ran an offense where the lineman can essentially run the same play over and over, and then something different happens every play, right? This is the RPO that Coach Freeze uses. We were frustrated because we were actually doing pretty well on the O-line. Like, we thought, oh, we're moving, folks. This is looking good. This should be a pretty, like, sort of towards the beginning of the game, like, all right, we're moving these guys. We should be able to sustain a run game. Even I think Chris Jones was there at that point. Like, we were still moving him. I mean, I think he was a true freshman that year, and he was still just, I mean, you knew he was going to be special for sure. But we're like, all right, we're moving these guys. It was one of those things where we didn't feel like, the score lined up with how we were doing, to be honest. I think that was my first overtime game that I had played in myself. I'd been a part of on the sideline for like the Jacksonville State game, which we don't have to go into that, but no, we won't go there. But that was the first one that I was like an active participant in, and it was just a really frustrating night all around. That was a team we thought we could beat. Now you know a lot better than I. Was that Dax?
Yes, coming back. Yeah,
and I don't think we expected that either. So I think we went in thinking like your third quarterback or something was going to be playing against us, so it shouldn't be that tough. And then Dak obviously is Dak, so
yeah,
he did his thing for sure. I get really frustrated watching like old highlights. When I watched the film afterwards, that was a really, really frustrating game. Just and seeing kind of a cheap shot on Bo at the end of that game. Had I seen that, it probably would have been one of our nice famous brawls in the Egg Bowl, because I don't think we had a real brawl that game. Had I seen that, there might have been one for sure, but I didn't see that when it happened. Just really frustrating because we thought we were winning that game, and it was a great game. Obviously, just, looking back on it, what a phenomenal night for football.
So, Jared, were you on the field the final play where Bo Wallace was stripped in the end zone? What happened on that play from your vantage point?
Gosh, I'm reaching way back. And that might be one of those I block out really. Right. I think, the play worked, right? I mean, it worked. I'm not sure, like anytime you don't always know when the ball's on the ground, especially when you hear all the cowbells ringing and everything, you can't hear anything. Huge advantage, by the way, hugely unfair advantage if you ask me, but whatever. I know you've got some cowbells. But yeah, it was just a really frustrating thing because it's, especially when a play works and you know it works and you see it work, and then right there at the end, it just given away. I mean, it's hard. You can't criticize Bo Wallace and just what he brought to the program and fire he lit under that program. I mean, I sincerely believe Ole Miss football is not where it is today without Bo Wallace.
Yes.
Without a doubt. I think he was such a foundational piece for, the post 2011 days. So, but it is frustrating to like, oh man, we were there. It was all perfect. And then just, football happens. It was a wet night too. So I've never had to carry a football in a game. So I know nothing about, having to hold on to a wet football in a game. So I can't make a judgment on that.
So, Jared, to finish off your college career at Ole Miss, you capped it off in a win versus Georgia Tech in the Music City Bowl. What do you remember most about your final game in an Ole Miss uniform?
So I woke up that morning, Music City Bowl, all the plans in the world. We're going to, enjoy the city afterwards and everything. End of my career, very emotional already. I actually I got a call from my dad, and my grandpa had passed, and we had no idea that was coming. I mean, we knew he didn't have years, but we didn't expect that night or that day for him to pass. And I get choked up just talking about it, really, because it was like his mind was not there during my career to really enjoy a game and to watch me play a game. And it was like, oh, he got to watch my last game, and his mind was with him, and he was looking down, and that was a really special day. And to cap it off with a win is really nice too. But just an emotional day. Like you're on a roller coaster. At that point, I had pretty much known I'm probably not going to pursue the NFL.
Okay.
I still kind of waffled a little bit in the couple weeks after that. You sort of need to make that decision right after your season ends, so you can start that process. But and I had actually, I had some interest for sure. I didn't think, I football had gotten everything out of me for a career, and I knew that had I had a shot at the league, and I was told I had a shot, right? I was told like you might be invited to a camp, that kind of thing, as a an undrafted prospect. But I knew that guys that I deemed were probably more talented than me were really bounced around the league in a way that I was just kind of ready to close that chapter, I think. So it was extra. I'd kind of known at that point. And so to know it was my last game, going into, finding out about my grandpa that morning, I was a mess. I was an absolute mess that morning, or that whole day, to be honest. So it was a really special game for a lot of reasons. The game itself, what can I say? Georgia Tech, it's a bowl game, right? It was funny. We took that pretty seriously in terms of prepping for that game. Georgia Tech, I believe, showed up like a few days before bowl week. They were drunk to every event. I don't think they were really interested in the game as much as we were, to be honest. Probably saying too much, but it is what it is. They weren't really invested in that game, but it ended up being a closer game than we thought. I remember, all the seniors kind of getting in on one team and kneeling, doing the victory formation together, and that was a really special moment for all of us, just to be able to end it together there. Yeah, that was a fun one.
And you got to keep your game helmet from that matchup too, didn't you?
Yeah, I've got it right here. we got to keep that. I think we got to keep a jersey as well from that game. So I've got my I don't even know who it was Music City. I don't know who the sponsor was, but got the patch on it and everything. That was a really cool. Because hey, I come from a different era of college football. We don't get to keep our gear all that often. I'm sure now these guys can pay whatever they want for their gear. But back then we had slim pickings.
So Jared, I have a couple of rapid fire questions for you. The first one, what was the loudest away stadium that you ever played in and why?
Gosh, I hate giving LSU credit. I really do. I can't tell you how much I dislike. Now, if they want to hire me as a sports psychologist, we'll have a different conversation. But I'd have to say that my freshman season, I do remember fourth quarter. There was a full moon, and they kind of pointed the scoreboard camera at the full moon, and those people went nuts. That's a very, very inebriated place. So yeah, I'd have to give it to them. Honorable mention: Fresno was loud. Fresno was a small stadium that was really, really loud. I was very surprised, but it's the SEC. That's pretty standard, especially when you get cowbells to ring. So,
Jared, who was the biggest trash talker that you ever played against?
Oh, goodness. I forgot his name. He went on to have a pretty good career. Malik Jackson from the Tennessee defensive tackle. I do remember him trash talking. I'm not a trash talker whatsoever. Every now and then I will. And I do remember firing back at him at one point. You can get me there if you want me to. But I do remember firing back at him. I thought, I won't share those opinions, but I thought that was one of those games where I thought as an O-line, we were absolutely handling our business, but we had some interceptions we had to deal with, but probably Malik Jackson, surprisingly not
Farley.
Yeah, not Farley, not at all. Marcel Darius, he was up there. I remember that. He was an angry guy at me. Who else? Yeah, I don't know any. Basically, anyone in an Arkansas uniform as well.
Gotcha. So, Jared, you talked about earlier that you did very well outside of the first play against Nick Farley. Which defender or defense gave you the most fits as a player?
Ooh. I was really. You're not going to expect this at all. That Mizzou defensive line with Michael Sam and a couple other guys, they had some studs up there that were just. I mean, and really like. The high talent players like, LSU always had some studs on O-line or on D-line. Bama, sure enough, always had studs. Right. They were kind of guys that would take it easy, especially the fast offenses we were running. They would take it easy a little bit and then rev it up when they wanted to. When they wanted to, like in a 2-minute drill or something, it was pretty much impossible to stop them. I'm thinking about there's a Logan that played for LSU that was just unstoppable. What is his name? I think his last name was Logan, but unstoppable. I mean, you could not touch him. But that Mizzou D-line, they weren't the most talented for sure, but they just didn't stop. And they had a counter for everything. They had a motor. Like, they just did not take a play off. Those ended up being the hardest teams to play sometimes as an O-lineman because they were just phenomenal. We did play Aaron Donald against Pitt. That was a pretty obviously they didn't rest him at all in that game. So Yeah, they didn't rest him as a defensive lineman, which was just like criminal, probably. But when he wanted to, he could turn it on and just, you for sure. But yeah, those are the ones that come to mind.
So, Jared, I've got 3 questions left for you, and then we will get out of here.
Okay.
First one, looking back over your 51 games at Ole Miss, which game that you played in means the most to you and why?
Ooh. I think that LSU one does for sure. Going back to it, even with all the Sports Center not top 10 afterwards.
Right.
It was just such a special moment, especially just being such underdogs and feeling like you didn't have a chance, and then coming out on top was unlike anything else.
So, Jared, we will finish up with 2 things. First one, what is your favorite Houston Nutt story that you can share with us?
I wonder if I can share this, right? I think I can share this. He probably wouldn't mind. I was roommates with Patrick Junin, and man, Patrick may not like me sharing this, but we we were hanging out one afternoon. I think it was off season, and he gets a call from a number he doesn't know. And I plug it into my phone real quick, and I notice, it's Coach Nutt. He's calling you. And he had he asked Junin to take his daughter out for a date. And because Junin is like, that's who you want your daughter to marry, right, usually. So he paid for them to go on a date, and because his daughter was in town, and Junin took her out, and I'm fairly certain he was not with his current wife. So if you're listening, Junin, I got you covered there.
That's a whole.
Yeah, it's such a random. I've got a number of those, but he's just kind of a random guy. We like Coach Nutt a lot.
So what is a random conversation that you ever had with Houston Nutt?
Oh gosh. My first year I was in camp, and I think I'd surprised them a lot. And he walks up to me and he says, "Hey, can you give me your dad's number?" And I was like, "Oh boy. All right." So I gave it to him, and my dad calls me later that day, and he goes, "Why do I have a voicemail from Houston Nutt telling me, how good you're doing?" I'm like, "I don't know. That's awesome." So he went out of his way during camp just to call my dad and be like, "Hey, we're really proud of how he's developing," that kind of thing. That was kind of just the guy he was. He was just a good dude, I think.
So finally, I have thoroughly enjoyed this interview, Jared. What is your favorite Hugh Freeze story that you can share with us?
Yeah. Okay. So I think I think it was funny. We were we did a radio show every week with Dave Kellum, and they had me come on for one of those, and it was like a Hugh Freeze radio show, and I think I kind of, during the interview, I looked over and I was like, you probably wouldn't have recruited me, would you, Coach? I kind of put him on the spot there a little bit. And, I made him kind of go into his politician mode a little bit, but I got him on his toes a little bit by saying, "Yeah, I don't think Coach would have recruited me out of high school." And that's okay. That's fine. Just because I'm a giant offensive lineman that isn't quite his archetype for a lineman. But that was a funny moment that I remember. I'm sure there are a few more that come to mind, but
did he ever rib you about the issue of the not top 10 versus LSU?
He apologized to me, actually. So we saw that the next week. We were on the bus going to Tupelo, because that's where I think it was the home game, but we were going to Tupelo we stayed in Tupelo the night before the games. And so we were all on the bus as the first team offense. And, Dak shows up and I'm like, no, please. Like we usually watch Sports Center on the bus, whenever we're on the bus. And, I was like, please do not show not top 10 on this. Cause it was Friday and that's when they usually came out.
Right.
And sure enough, we're all on the bus and that highlight comes up and, I got to watch him see it for the first time and he had no idea it was happening. And, he apologized. He apologized like June and Duke. I'm so sorry. Like, you got me. I don't know why they said you didn't get me, but you got me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Jared, look, I have thoroughly enjoyed this 1.5-hour interview with you, reminiscing about your time at Ole Miss, and especially becoming a doctoral of psychology. If you would, anything else that you would like to say, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for having me. And, I've really enjoyed the question. These aren't, I've done several of these and, you ask good questions, Stephen. You've got some good ones. You made me think pretty hard tonight. So I appreciate that. It took me down memory lane.
So, Jared, I will leave you with this hotty toddy, my friend, and good luck to you in your pursuit of doctoral there with psychology. And please let everybody know where they can follow you and keep up with you on that journey on social media.
Yeah. My tag is Jared UKE, so Jared Duke, basically, on all formats. I do see patients, so I kind of keep things close to the vest usually.
Right.
People don't want their psychologists tweeting all the time, especially around football season. I fire off some hot takes sometimes, so you might see a few of those before they get deleted.
So, Jared, we would love for you to come back during the college football season and break down some offensive line play in the SEC.
Sure. Sounds good.
Okay. Well, man, have a wonderful rest of your summer. Happy 4th of July next week, and we will definitely catch up with you later on.
All right. Good to talk to you.
Thank you, man. And hotty toddy.
Hotty toddy.
So, guys, that is going to wrap up the incredible interview there with offensive lineman from Ole Miss, Jared Duke. Really do want to thank him for joining us, who played under Hugh and Houston Nutt.